If they ain't pink, how am I supposed to know they're girls? Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. On today's MIA 80s Ladies, we're going to be talking about two characters I've grouped together strictly because they are not, in fact, Transformers, and two characters that I had really conceived of doing a video on very early when planning this series, but certainly are not two of the top dogs, but have absolutely had more of a legacy with the fandom, with Hasbro and Takara themselves. So let's just get right into Nightbird and Carly Spencer from G1 Transformers. We've already discussed Transformers in past videos regarding, especially RC, but also Elita 1 and her little troop of female Autobots. So I'm going to skip, the history lesson between Takara and Hasbro and the cartoon of G1 Transformers. But there are certainly, non-Transformers female characters who I think are worthy of discussion. And as, we mentioned up top, they're not Autobots nor technically Decepticons. So this is sort of a great area to talk about characters who Hasbro did not have a problem with, discussing their gender because they had their own little internal dialogues and conflicts in that regard. These two are solely separate from that. First up would be one of the Autobots' human allies, Carly Spencer, who first made her appearance in an episode called The Immobilizer in Season 2 of the original Transformers cartoon. She was a very interesting character in the sense that she was, not a typical damsel in distress kind of character, but, an MIT graduate, someone who had expertise in chemistry and electronics, someone who was very, very, very intelligent. And probably, the most competent of all human allies the Transformers had. The episode kicks off with Bumblebee and Spike, in an arcade, which not weird at all. Carly, of course, really zeroes in on Bumblebee and has a million questions for him. Spike, being the little douche he is, gets really jealous and huffy about it. But, let's just, take it from Carly's perspective. If you were to walk into an arcade and there's some dude with a boring white button-up and a talking car from another planet, who are you going to talk to first? Obviously the car. The two boys sort of take off on a mission shortly thereafter, and Carly follows them, and, in 80s girl, terms, definitely gets herself into trouble more often than not, but at the very least does bring something to the table, and by episode's end, does accept a date with Spike, which will become more important later on. As for, Season 2, she doesn't make a whole lot of appearances, but certainly enough to make her feel and seem like, a recurring supporting character, a recurring guest character who would come back again and again. Post-robot killing movie and into Season 3, where we do a big time jump into the futuristic world of 2005, Carly would again make a few appearances, this time as an adult, and now finally as sort of an Earth ambassador alongside her now husband, Spike. The two of them would also have a son named Daniel, which, thanks, Carly. Second up is a one-episode wonder, a character named Nightbird, who was created by Dr. Fujiyama, the famous scientist. He had requested Prime and his Autobots sort of stand guard so the Decepticons wouldn't interfere in his unveiling of a, strictly Transformers scale female robot ninja. A lot to unpack there. Funnily enough, also a mute, which also a lot to unpack there. She was essentially, sort of a showcase of how, the Transformers' presence on Earth had, kind of made humanity sort of try to step up their game. And so she was a very advanced robot and sort of like a big show of sorts on humans' part. Of course, Megatron and the Decepticons showed up and took her captive. Because she wasn't quite sentient, they reprogrammed her to be, sort of an honorary Decepticon. She, again, could not transform, but she was certainly a worthy adversary to the Autobots, and so she took off on just a complete rampage. So the Autobots were very, prescient not to harm her because they did, sort of promise the good doctor not to do so, but also had a very difficult time, kind of capturing her. So very memorable episode. Again, like Carly, wasn't until Season 2. Again, during that time when they were starting to at least sort of veer into female Transformers on the way to RC's big debut. But, neither of these characters were, I'm not going to say worthy of toys, but certainly were not on the docket. I mean, neither of them were, Transformers, which was the gimmick, the shtick, the whole, reason for the season of the Transformers toys back in the 80s. However, they were sort of, if not main characters, memorable characters, and some that would certainly make their mark later on. Since then, both characters have really sort of exploded on the scene of comic books, cartoons, even movies. The two of them are certainly embedded in, the cake that is Transformers. As for toys, this is a little more difficult for me because as much as I sort of, I've always kept tabs on Transformers, I'm not an expert on it. So to the best of my knowledge, to the best of my research, Carly's only seen one real official toy, and that would be in the 2019 masterpiece, let's call him Optimus Prime. Officially, he was known as Convoy, and she would be included in, with the other two human allies, Spike and Sparkplug. Very, very microscopic figures that were, small enough to get into Prime's, cab, but not exactly the most articulated, well-painted figures you've ever seen in your life. That said, you look at them, you know precisely what they are. And once again, these are strictly the season 1 and 2 kind of looks for these characters. We wouldn't see a season 3 Carly, frankly, ever. But, they didn't really get a whole lot of play in official Transformers merch, at least from G1. That said, Transformers is a very unique brand in that they have what maybe other collectors would call, custom, fan-made, maker movement. They have something called third party, which is not official, not technically legal, but also something not anything that Hasbro or Takara goes after, where you have fans making incredible Transformers toys and making them often better than the two big dogs who actually make them officially. In this regard, if you want Carly and Spike and Sparkplug and anyone else, this is where, it's a better avenue. So if you're interested, certainly go to, say, Show Z store. They've got a lot of great figures in all of Carly's looks that, certainly would, benefit your collection. Nightbird, however, has had a bit more luck in this regard. So in the 2010s, let's say, RC sort of finally got her first real official RC looking figure in the G1 style. She would get a re-release in 2015, a little redeco, and from that, we would get our first, not only Nightbird figure, but also the first real link between the two characters. This would see, essentially a redeco of that RC figure with a new head, new chassis, and a ton of weapons. She basically had all of RC's weapons, plus a bunch of extra little, Ninja-y accessories. So this really began a trend in Nightbird's merchandise. Nightbird's next official figure would be in 2019, this time a redeco of the sort of more motorcycle-ish Chromia figure, which kind of bucks this trend. But when RC got her long-awaited masterpiece figure, Nightbird was soon to follow. So in 2022, an RC redeco, again with sort of a new chassis, new head, would be released of Nightbird, again with a ton of accessories, more, ninja-esque. This one would, again, sort of transform into a very RC-ish car, which frankly is a car I love, this time, of course, in sort of gray and purple versus RC's pink and white. This trend would also sort of go out beyond this. So we would see, say, in, Transformers mobile game Earth Wars, when RC was introduced to the game, Nightbird came out at the exact same time, essentially using the exact same mold digitally, as well as the exact same power form, the exact same abilities. We would see RC in the movies. Nightbird would follow. I mean, we really do see a lot of push and pull here, and there's an important reason to be excited for this. If you follow me on Instagram, if you see me on live feeds, you know that's sort of one of the big figures for me in 2025 that's coming out in the fall is the RC prototype as part of Hasbro and Takara's Missing Link line. This takes what should have been the RC figure we got back in the 80s and gives it a lot more articulation and frankly just, releases it for the first time ever so that we fans can have either the prototype colors or the animation correct colors and slot it into your G1 thing. I am perfectly aware that this is one of the ugliest toys ever made. However, it's the essence of it. It's the, just the actual, literally putting a missing link in your collection. That's what's very exciting to me, and that's what gets me excited for the potential of a Nightbird figure, because once again, companies love to reuse a mold. We have it. It seems to be doing well, so there is, a reason for the season where, in theory, we could get, a reuse of this mold for a G1 accurate ugly as hell Nightbird figure. So I just, if people see this in the future, when this is getting made, I want it to be on film, to be known that I am the Miss Cleo of Toy Tubers. And that'll about do it for not only Nightbird and Carly Spencer, but I think for Transformers. I think this conversation's been put to bed. I mean, we're really kind of dredging the bottom here. These are two characters that never stood a chance of being in the toy line. I mean, if the other human characters didn't make it, Carly certainly wouldn't. If, RC wasn't made, Elita 1, Nightbird, that whole crew, never gonna happen. So, it's one of those things where, I usually, I would have loved them back in the day, but never gonna happen. That said, their appearances since, their, entrenchment into the mythos, their constant appearances whenever Transformers is rebooted, which is often, really speaks to the, the importance and how much the fans have really glommed onto them since, and how much money there is there for Hasbro and Takara. So, interesting little case study here, where it's one where even I'm like, yeah, they were never going to get made, and it's unfortunate but not surprising, but certainly exciting that they've really blown up since. So, with that, I thank you for watching. I thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all those YouTubey things, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.